Well, welcome, Ramanan. It's a great pleasure to sit down with you for this conversation. You're an experienced podcast host yourself. I know that. I'm less experienced, but I've been doing this for about a year now, and believe it or not, this is me more comfortable than I was at the beginning, if you can tell. But I hope you'll bear with me as I kick off the conversation. Anyway, and I promise before too long, I'm going to hand over the lead to you, and I will have to be in the hot seat at that point.
I've got tough questions for you.
I can imagine, yeah. So for our audience, I'd like to share that you and I first became acquainted when I was a new associate dean for the natural sciences, and you were serving as chair of the SAS Board of Advisors. And I've always appreciated what a great advocate you've been for the school. And I think for me particularly, it was great to see someone in that role as I came into the dean's office, coming from where you are in the business world and what you do, but such a staunch advocate for the liberal arts and the humanities. And I really enjoyed that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mark. And, you're 10 months into this, and I think there's a crossover point at the 8-month mark where you're no longer the new dean, you're just the dean.
That's what I've been told.
And I just want to congratulate you on transitioning so successfully to what is a huge role. I love all our schools equally, but SAS is a big, sprawling place, and leading it in the way that you've begun leading it is not easy.
Thank you for that.
And obviously, the speed at which you've produced our new strategic vision, SAS Horizons, is the ideal building block for the years that lie ahead for you.
Well, that's really nice of you. I'll really look forward to talking more about Horizons further on in the conversation. I think, the thing you highlighted is something that's been tricky for me. I think, we move deliberately in academia. You and I have talked about this before. Most of that, I think, is a feature, not a bug. We try to be thoughtful to produce things that are lasting, enduring, well thought out. But, the present time does call for us to move rather quickly in certain areas. And so balancing those has been tricky, but I'm pretty pleased with how we got this out quickly. But before we talk about that plan, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your own history with the school, because you've had an interesting path through Penn itself, and indeed through Arts and Sciences. So your undergraduate degrees are from engineering and Wharton, but years later you rounded things out with a Master's of Liberal Arts from our own College of Liberal and Professional Studies. That's really a big switch, or at least it seems that way to me. So what motivated that, and what did you study? And what did you personally get out of that deeper dive into the liberal arts?
Look, that's a great question. It's, if you went to my LinkedIn bio, you'd see the sequence of degrees, and it's puzzling. And the backstory here is I came to Penn as a foreign student from India, 16 years old, didn't know up from down, and Penn changed my life. And what I did at Penn as an undergraduate was, as you said, a degree in computer science from the engineering school and a degree in finance from the Wharton School. I'm a very proud alumnus of both schools, and it was a wonderful education. But as you know, Mark, when you do dual degrees at Penn, you end up using the electives for one degree to fulfill the requirements for the other.
Indeed.
And so you're very limited in how much you can explore, not for any other reason other than you're trying to do so much.
Time.
And as the years went by after I graduated, I really felt that vacuum, that lack, that I'd come to this amazing place and I had not taken full advantage of it. And specifically for me, and a quick detour here, we keep talking about the liberal arts. We have to remember it's the liberal arts and sciences. And we'll, I suspect, come back to that. But for me, the humanities were really missing from my education. Yeah. And I wanted to fix that gap. So Penn has, the School of Arts and Sciences has the College of Liberal and Professional Studies, which for people who don't quite understand what that means, it's lifelong education beyond what you might have done as an undergraduate. And it's open to all, not just Penn undergrads. And it has this jewel of a program called the Master of Liberal Arts, which I describe as a part-time degree in the humanities for working professionals. And so I commuted down from New York City once a week and took classes here. And the MLA is a reasonably common degree program, but each MLA is different. And one of the things that makes Penn's MLA very different is you actually have access to all grad courses at the School of Arts and Sciences, as long as you fulfill certain other requirements. So I was back in the classroom. There was one class with 15 PhD students and me, and that was very intimidating. But it was life-changing in every respect. I took 5 years to complete it, did coursework, did what is called a capstone, which is a mini thesis at the end of it. And it was life-changing for many reasons, one of which was just the learning, to be back in the classroom in my 40s and fill in all the gaps that I knew I had in my education. And the other is it brought more purpose to my life. It gave me a sense for that which we all know, which is there is more to one's life than one's career. Yeah. And so I enjoyed it tremendously, and I've gone on to continue trying to find ways to educate myself.
I have to ask, what did you write your capstone project? Am I putting you on the spot here?
No. The capstone that I wrote was one that dealt with complex issues of identity, interwoven, and you will relate to this element, I'm sure, interwoven with the sport of cricket. And I'll leave the rest of it mysterious.
That is mysterious. I agree. And what did you you and I have talked before about this, and it's clear that you really embraced the entirety of that master's program. You loved it all, but does some piece of it stick in your head? Is there some piece that you thought was particularly for you, just sort of spoke to your intellectual journey?
There's so much cynicism about higher ed in the public discourse. Yeah. If you just sat in on one of these classes, which is not an undergraduate class, it's for working professionals. These are evening courses for the most part. And you saw the authenticity with which the instructors in these classes, who are professors of various categories from adjunct to full, you would be really moved. They care. And that has never left me in the years since I finished the degree program, that these are people who they're all brilliant. They have many choices for what they could have done with their lives. But not only do they choose to teach at Penn, they're prepared to teach to, kind of an amateurish audience. And that was wonderful. And, these are all SAS faculty.
Oh, that's great to hear, particularly in my position right now. So shift gears a little bit. Recently I'm seeing, as you well know, more and more stories in the news about how developments like AI are making a broad education in arts and sciences more important than ever. And certainly when I've been on the road talking about horizons and talking about my own thoughts about the future of arts and sciences, this is something that's front and central for me. As technology transforms the nature of work, the ideas, I think, what people need are skills like the ability to analyze, the ability to communicate, the ability to understand ethical frameworks, judgment, and how to ask the right questions. I think that's in some sense the most fundamental one. I know you've done a lot of thinking about this topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's complex, it's very large. And also, I think we can acknowledge the field is moving so quickly that which we say today may be out of date or out of fashion in 6 months. I view AI and technology writ large, but AI in particular, as a tool and a mechanism. Not that different, despite what is being said in the public discourse, not that different from other advances in the past, the invention of the printing press, for instance. So I'm neither an AI optimist or an AI pessimist. I view it as a tool and a mechanism. I do think that ups the ante, ups the onus on all of us, faculty, students, leadership, deans, trustees, to be aware of what's happening and to be knowledgeable so that the decisions we make come from a place of knowledge, not ignorance. In this AI-inflected world, technology-inflected world, I think the importance of the liberal arts and sciences actually grows, because that is the place where you learn how to ask the right questions. That is the place where, as you said, you learn to frame lines of attack, of inquiry, of intellectual focus. I think it will greatly increase the importance of how you communicate, especially verbal communication. Yeah. And so if you think about the place in a great university where you learn those things, right, it's going to be in your biology class, in your history class. Yeah. These are places where you have to get up and defend in a setting of your peers and faculty, that which it is which you are analyzing, which you are discussing, which you're prognosticating, all of that, I think, centers around the liberal arts and sciences. So I'm glad I went back and did the MLA because I'm a little better at it than I used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing that always strikes me is that when I think about what happened with the internet, it gave such an opening, such a sort of democratization in principle to the world of knowledge. Right? Many things that you would have wanted to know are now there for you to know.
Right.
What we've seen, of course, is that as that has progressed, it's become a place where it is very hard for many people to ascertain what is the right knowledge.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff out there. And so I think we've gone from a place where we have this wonderful universal encyclopedia to a place where human judgment and the ability to understand, analyze, synthesize knowledge and decide what the right questions and the right answers are has become even more important, even while this deluge of information has become so free. And I think in AI, we're going to see that, but at a much accelerated pace.
And we're seeing it already.
Yeah.
We're seeing it already. I think it's, I am pushing Penn on all fronts, not just in the context of this conversation, but elsewhere, to be AI leaders. At the same time, I'm also pushing Penn to be very thoughtful about the incredible misinformation that can emerge from, the models hallucinate. And they sound very convincing, but any practitioner will tell you, you've just got to be really careful about how you navigate with the usage of these tools.
I mean, it is remarkable to me. I use these tools myself. We can talk a little more about that later. I use it in my work. I use it, in my everyday life. And they're remarkably sophisticated. They can do remarkably sophisticated things. But, last night you and I went to an event at the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Right.
And on my invitation, it said the entrance we're going to use is the west entrance.
Right.
And I'm not very good at directions, it turns out. Right. So I put into Google, what's the west entrance to the Philadelphia Museum of Art? And I got the AI-generated output that very confidently told me it was the wrong entrance. And this does not strike me as a sophisticated thing to answer.
No.
So, I think there's a lot to say about the role of AI in liberal arts, and I'm sure we'll get to more of it later. But I think this is a good point for me to turn the conversation to you a little bit and let you play my role.
I'm going to surf right on that topic because we're on AI. One observation about the School of Arts and Sciences I have is, as I said right at the beginning, I love all our schools equally and all our deans equally. The School of Arts and Sciences is the most complex school at Penn, and that's because of its intellectual sprawl.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question that is very broad, and you can take it however you wish, into physics or history. How do you think, what are you seeing in the use of AI at SAS that leads you to begin formulating some conclusions about how it will change what goes on in the school?
Yeah, it is a big question, and I will only scratch the surface, I'm sure. But, there are two very broad categories, I think, in which to answer that question. One, I think, is one where I think we can have a lot of optimism, and as well as, it's kind of scary to have to move ahead, which is how can we improve what we do using AI? How can we embrace AI? How can we turn this into a wonderful thought partner in our research and teaching enterprise? I'll say more about that in a minute. The other thing I think is, though, students come to Penn. We want them to learn. We want them to engage. We want them to take part in these deep intellectual and philosophical discussions. At the end of the day, we want them to get a degree from Penn, and we want that degree to mean something.
Right.
And, one of the, you yourself referred to the sort of loud discourse about higher education that's been going on. And a piece of that is, how do you really understand and validate the degrees that students have? And I think AI is making that a very difficult place. And so there is a part of the question that you asked, I think, that really is answered by, we have to figure out ways to evaluate our students in a fair and equitable way that does not allow those results to be corrupted by AI. And that's a practical matter that I'm actually very confident we will solve. Some of these solutions will be old school. Some of them will be novel and innovative, but I think we'll just solve it. But it is at this precise moment, a bit of a churn around that.
Right.
The first question, I think, is much more interesting and fascinating. And you yourself said you want Penn to lead in AI, and I've done a lot of thinking about what I think that should mean. I think there are parts of AI where universities, frankly, will never lead.
Right.
Okay, there are parts of AI that are tailor-made for technology to lead, companies to lead. And I just don't think we have any business in that. If you look at those companies and the technology that they're building their remarkable products on, you will find that essentially everything, as you do in every part of life, traces back to some wonderful discovery and fundamental knowledge that came out of a place like Penn.
Right.
And so I think that one thing we need to focus on is we have a distinctive fact about the school and about the university is that I think is its excellence. The faculty are truly excellent and world-class, as you yourself commented on. The students are just remarkable. The culture, I think, is vibrant and innovative. And also, frankly, we have some very lucky, I would say, just physical facts to be located in a dense urban environment like Philadelphia that's so vibrant, that is, situated geographically near Washington, D.C. and near New York and all these, easy reach of international travel. So all of that, I think, is important. I think what in every part of that, AI can enhance what we do. So I'm not so worried really about AI replacing things we do. I think it's going to allow us to accelerate and improve the things we do. What I'm finding hard is, you yourself said we have to be knowledgeable about this and educated. And I do a lot to try to be knowledgeable and educated about this, but every day it
There's
changes.
Something new.
And so trying to hatch a long-term strategy while having that in mind is a double-edged sword. And we will, in fact, later this month, formally launch the AI strategy for the School of Arts and Sciences that's part of the Horizons plan.
Right.
And you'll see in that, I think, things that we have thoughtfully tried to make enduring, but have the ability to adapt depending on how AI evolves over the coming years.
Got it. We could spend this whole podcast on AI,
We really could.
and we really shouldn't. And so I want to take us in a very different direction, and one that's very near and dear to me. As you know, Mark, I came to Penn as an international student. I was 16. It was the first time I left my home country. I didn't know up from down, and Penn changed everything for me, right? And it was an amazingly welcoming place. And so in Horizons, your strategic vision, one of the things you talk about is the role that SAS has to play in catalyzing and fostering global engagement across Penn. And to be clear, we are a great American institution.
Yes.
But it's impossible to be a great American institution without touching the world.
That's right.
And so the question for you is, because you have a little international in you, talk a little bit about your journey here, because I think that'll help frame it. And then your view of SAS's commitment to global engagement.
Yeah, so I didn't come here as an undergraduate like you did, but I came here to graduate school. So I was an undergraduate in the United Kingdom, where I'm from originally. I was a math undergraduate at Cambridge. And I came through that, I sort of found my way into theoretical physics, and I came to the US to do my PhD in physics, and I stayed.
Right.
I am eternally grateful for the opportunities that being in the United States has given me. I was a first generation college student. I actually don't think I could ever have imagined the life that I lead today when I was a young person. And part of that I'm very happy to put down to my own skill sets and drive, but a huge part of that is due to the opportunities that I was offered by coming here and working hard. So it means a lot to me that. I would also like to believe that I bring something important to this country, and I would like to believe you do too. And so when I look at our school, it's, as you say, we're a great American institution. We should be proud of that. But we're also an internationally leading institution. And you cannot be an internationally leading institution in a globally interconnected world unless you embrace the global, unless you allow the ability to bring the best and the brightest from the world who want to come here, take advantage of the things that we offer in the school, give us all the wonderful gifts that they bring, and then maybe some of them stay and do wonderful things for the country and the university, and maybe some of them leave and take those wonderful skills home. But I think that's a remarkable role that we play. And I will say parenthetically, I also think it's a remarkable piece of soft power in the world that the country has that I think it's easy to forget about when you just think about the sprawling enterprise that's higher education in general. So when we thought about Horizons, I think this was very much top of mind, that yes, we're a great School of Arts and Sciences in an American city in the United States, but we can only be one of the best in the world if we embrace this. And so I think there are two pieces to that for us, really. More than two, but sort of broad things. One is the ability to do everything we can to attract and retain the very best and brightest minds in the world. And so, my first year as dean, as you know, I've been in Hong Kong and Singapore and Delhi and Mumbai and London and all these places. And part of that is to spread the word about how wonderful SAS is, but part of it is to say, look, we're in a particularly tricky time right now in the United States when it comes to global relations. Understand that we at Penn really care about this. We welcome you with open arms, and we want you to come here, and we want you to succeed. The other part, though, I think, is that we do a lot of scholarship in the school that is itself intrinsically global. And some of that is very nuts and bolts, okay? We have, in my own department, physics and astronomy, people who work on the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Right. We send huge groups of people over there. They build parts of the detectors in the Large Hadron Collider, and they go and install them, and they watch the data come in, and they work there. That is, fundamentally globally connected science in that case. Can't be done any other way. If we don't embrace it, we just become incredibly siloed away.
Right.
But we also have scholarship in the school that, as part of what it does, actively studies global issues. And there's a lot of this, and I certainly can't name it all. In Horizons, one of the things I'm really interested in doing is trying to gather all those disparate ways in which we study the world under a sort of centralized umbrella so that we can show the world, firstly, we have a center here that studies, India. We have a center here that studies Korea. But in fact, what we really have is a set of interconnected global institutes that together comprise a sort of coherent approach to the world.
Right.
And so we'll try to do that, I think. And I think it's going to, outward facing, it'll show the world, look, this is actually what we do. You don't have to come in and poke around and find out what we do. Inward facing, my hope is that it will create interconnections between these centers that they've not had before. And just as the world is interconnected more and more, I would like to see these centers understanding how scholarship about different cultures and countries, it relates to one another.
That is super exciting. I'm obviously very familiar with SAS's footprint in various global intellectual endeavors, and the idea of bringing order to that, so to speak, and providing a unified window with which to treat them or think about them is really powerful. Yeah. Since I have you captive, I'm going to stay on another topic that is of high interest to me, which is climate and sustainability, which is an aspect of my day job. The school's done a lot, not just in recent years, but over a long period, especially around energy research, where at the undergraduate level, we have hallmark degree programs and so on. Now, there's an incredible new building on our campus devoted to that work. Yes. What's next for SAS and climate?
Well, I'll maybe, build in my own segue from your previous question first to say that climate is a great example, which I could say this about many things that we do, but climate is a particularly great example of where historically the U.S. has had a global leadership position. We may not always have a political stance that people like, internationally or globally. That's not a scientific question, for example. That's a policy question. But in terms of how you do the basic science, how you understand the world, how you understand the climate, how you interpret it, we have been leaders in this. And that's only been possible by maintaining our global position and our standing scientifically. So I think this is actually very connected to your last question.
Right.
In the school, you're right. We have wonderful dual degree programs and degree programs within the school that are focused on things that are directly relevant to climate sustainability, such as, the VIPER program and, Vagilis Integrated Program and things like that. But I think many of those things are centered specifically around energy. The Vagilis Laboratory for Energy Science and Technology, which is one of our flagship laboratories on campus, is a centerpiece of that effort. Yeah. And I think that has put us at the cutting edge of energy research in the United States, and I'm very proud of that. So what's the next step? I think, the next flagship project from my perspective in the School of Arts and Sciences that is to do with climate is something we call Plant Arc. Right. So this is something we stood up about a year and a half ago, but it's in its infancy, and our hope is to be able to find support, philanthropic, government, and other ways to really scale up this effort. So Plant Arc is the Plant Adaptability and Resilience Center. It's headed up by my colleague Doris Wagner in the biology department, who is a force of nature and is really just running with this idea everywhere. And what Doris and her team want to do is they want to understand, if you gave nature, 100,000 years, 200,000 years to adapt to a changing climate,
right.
The things that we think of as crops and other things may actually adapt. Evolution is a remarkably resilient process. But we're changing the climate in a very short time, and that doesn't happen. So, the potential for food insecurity, for famines, for places that used to be, fertile places to become deserts, and other places that are maybe not used to holding crops, now becoming amenable to holding crops, but not used to having crops there. They have their own microclimate. All these questions are increasingly important. And what Doris's team wants to do is to find ways to surgically alter crops in a way that will allow them to be resilient to climate change. And I think, on the face of it, that sounds somewhat easy, right? Let's find a plant that is hardy. Let's build that hardiness into a plant that we really need, and you're done.
Right.
Of course, it turns out it's much more complicated than that.
Yes.
Who would have guessed?
Yes.
And I think, so how do you do this? There's, of course, a theoretical side. There's a kind of technical side. But there's also how do you check and learn that this works and tweak that? And the way they want to do this is by building 6 large, what are called phytotrons. They're walk-in climate chambers.
Okay.
You can push the climate backwards into the past and forwards into the future, and you can try different climates, and you can test how each of these things you're doing works. And the goal there is to develop they're going to focus on 3 particular types of crops at the beginning, but this will be an extended effort, and try to figure out how we can do this in a surgical way. I could say huge amounts about this. Doris has a very expansive vision. This connects to things as diverse as the FDA in the United States. It connects to urban food deserts. She's very involved in the community, urban farming, all these things. So I think it's not just something that touches the science and climate part of the Horizons Plan, but also it really speaks to our hunger to connect to our community and to the country and really affect change coming from the fundamental science that we're doing. So that's the next step for us. It's very exciting.
That is super exciting, and we could spend another hour on this topic.
We'll find time some other time.
We will. Yeah. So Horizons, the vision is very ambitious. You've got some pretty stratospheric goals,
Yep.
which obviously all of us love. But one of the biggest, or maybe the biggest, that comes across is strengthening the research ecosystem. And that is a quote from the visions document.
Yep.
That's a very, it may not feel that way to the average listener, but that's a big deal. That's a big statement. What does it actually mean? And what does it mean to strengthen it in the ways that you are thinking of strength?
Yeah. Again, this is one of those things there's a lot to say about, but let me split this up into a couple of areas. I think there's one relatively discrete thing I can say here that really is important to us. So, many of the people listening to this podcast will be Penn alumni. Those Penn alumni will have taken their first math or physics class or science class or maybe some other class in a building called the David Rittenhouse Laboratory. They may know it better as DRL.
We all know it well.
Yeah. So you probably don't have the fondest memories of that building.
I don't.
It's 70 or more years old.
Yes.
Anyone who feels bad about having taken a class in that building, I will tell you, I have had an office in that building for 17 years, so feel bad for me. But at its time, it was a wonderful scientific building.
Yes.
And it really was a statement, I think, of Penn's investment in the future at a time when science was perceived to be particularly important, as it is today, I think. And so what will be, I think, a generational investment, not just for the school, but for the university, and will happen during my time as dean, as long as people don't grow tired of me prematurely, is that we will replace large parts of that building. We will demolish large parts of that building. We will build a gleaming new physical sciences complex. We will keep a little bit of it, and we will back renovate that. And together, that will become a single integrated complex that will house physics and astronomy department, the mathematics department, all of the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department. And just as the building is now, will be essentially the single largest repository of teaching space in the school, if not on campus. It'll sit on the footprint that it sits now, which puts it right next to the Vagilis Laboratory, right across the street from the Nanotechnology Center, right across the street from engineering, just up from chemistry, a block away from the data science building. So this creates, I think, a quad of Penn that is forward-looking and brings all our research enterprises in the sciences, fully into the modern day. And I'm excited about this as dean. I'm deeply excited about this as a physicist who will have an office in that building. So that is a big part of strengthening the research ecosystem. And it's, it probably sounds very simple, but this is an enormous, complicated project. But it will strengthen our ability to attract, recruit, and retain the very best scientists in the world. And it'll always also put these people into close contact where the great ideas will spawn from. It will bring students and faculty and staff from many places through the building. There will be serendipitous interactions between people, which I think will lead to new connections. And, physics, chemistry, earth and environmental sciences, mathematics, all these different areas are now becoming so interconnected in areas that are critical to the world: quantum, data science, materials science, all these ways. So it's really just critical that we do this.
This is wildly exciting.
It's incredible. It really is, I think, a statement of the university's commitment to fundamental knowledge in this time, and it's going to transform the way we do business on campus. The other piece of the plan that I talk about in strengthening the research infrastructure is to do with how we think about funding, certainly the initial efforts at research across the school. And this is not restricted to the sciences. I mean, all of our efforts here. In the sciences, of course, we've historically relied very strongly on the wonderful partnership with the federal government that we've had since the Second World War.
Right.
I'm actually optimistic that in important forms that is going to remain, but it's certainly undergone a lot of changes in the last year, and I don't think anyone really knows where that will land.
Right.
But I think I would have been interested in this part of the strategic plan even separately from that happening, and that is that many of the great ideas that people have now in the school, be it in our history of art department or our religion department or biology or chemistry or economics, are things that are rapidly moving. We talked a lot about how the world is changing so quickly. People's responses to that and their intellectual ideas are also trying to catch up with that. And you can't write some enormous proposal and wait 10 months for it to be evaluated just to hear that you should tweak it and repeat next year in these things. So what I want to do is generate a fund, a philanthropically based fund that will allow our incredibly generous donors and alumni to see transparently what their money is supporting, what important work is being supported, but will allow me the flexibility to say every year, to pick a number of projects and say, okay, you wrote a great one-page proposal, we've picked it,
right.
Take 5 years of support. Right. And support the entirety of the ecosystem around that. Graduate students, a lot of our listeners and alumni were undergraduates. They remember grad students as maybe just that TA, but they are so intrinsically interwoven, absolutely, into everything we do, the teaching, the research, the mentoring. We have to find a way to support graduates. So this would support the graduate students, undergraduate research, the actual project itself. We'd do that for about the lifespan of a graduate student. And then 5 years later, I would say, that was fantastic.
Right.
Hopefully now you've had this boost, you've found some other funding, or we've funded a way to fund it. We'll take this fund now, go support a different exciting project. Right. So rapid response, fast-moving, low overhead to faculty, way to boost our research output.
I mean, this sounds wildly exciting. As you know, in my capacity as chair of your board, while I was in that capacity, the importance and need for graduate student funding was something that was very meaningful and important for the board and for the dean then and now.
Yeah.
So I have a closing question here, and I'll philosophize for 1 second, which is because I get the same question.
Yes.
I get the question and the question I'm going to ask you is, where does your optimism come from? And my own optimism, because I get this question a lot from alumni, is around the fact that in many ways the university and the School of Arts and Sciences have actually never been in a stronger place. And you can pick the metric, and that will be true. Mm-hmm. And what that gives us is not a moment to sit on our laurels, but really to view that as a foundation, to view that as a foundation for taking Penn to the next echelon. And my optimism comes from that observation and also all the people at Penn that I know. The Horizons vision is a very optimistic vision. It's really moving in that respect. What is the source of your optimism?
So, we talked a little bit earlier about I personally could not have imagined when I was a young person living the life that I live now. And I mean that in many dimensions. One dimension is, I grew up with a lot of people who went every day to their jobs and didn't love their jobs.
Right.
And that's actually the norm for most people.
Right.
Okay. And certainly in this job, there are many challenges. There are many things every single day that have me pulling my hair out
Right.
and that are difficult to deal with. And it would be, wrong to deny that.
Right.
Nevertheless, every single day of my life, I get to wake up, walk onto this beautiful campus, right, interact with the smartest young people in the world. Right. Nowadays, I get to lead a school comprising some of the absolute top scholars in everything they do in the world. I go to visit with faculty come to talk to me. I get to learn about things. It's like you said yourself about going back to school and like a student again.
Right.
So, I am fortunate enough to be paid part of my time to study the thing that I love, theoretical physics, and a great chunk of my time to lead and strategize and try to solve problems for one of the world's greatest intellectual centers. And that privilege and the fact that I get up every day to do that makes me wildly optimistic. When it is very hard to lead a school like the School of Arts and Sciences and meet those students and meet those faculty and understand the remarkable breakthroughs they're making every day in their fields, often, against incredible odds. We talked a lot about geopolitical turmoil and global interconnectedness. Many of the things we do in the world today in our disciplines in arts and sciences involve going to very difficult places to do remarkable work. And our faculty are up for that, and they do the most remarkable things in the most difficult of circumstances. So how can you not be around these people and be optimistic? You would be something wrong with you, I think. So I love it, even in the face of all the problems we've been having. But you said, you described, I think, eloquently what you think gives you optimism, I think, about the school. You have this broader vision now. We met when you were chair of our board, and we kind of mostly talked about that at that time. And it's been, fun for me to see you, being the chair of the trustees and taking on this role at such a critical time for Penn. In a broader sense, how do you see the future of higher education for the whole university? Are you optimistic? How do you think?
I'm very optimistic, incredibly optimistic. And the key to that optimism is to look beyond viral articles and random tweets and so on and so forth to the substance of what we do. We, as you said, we educate the best minds. We do cutting edge research. And we are civic citizens in Philadelphia in a way that, in my humble opinion, we were not when I was an undergraduate.
Interesting.
We weren't a bad citizen.
Yeah.
I think we were just less engaged. Yeah. And I think that's really changed. And I see that in our student body. I see our students clamoring for ways to engage with the city of Philadelphia in all kinds of interesting ways. So you pull that all together, and there's just a lot of optimism about Penn's future. For arts and sciences, there's an equal degree of optimism, one thread of that point stems from, this is the core of the university. This is what Ben Franklin founded. Ben Franklin founded essentially the predecessor to the School of Arts and Sciences, and here we are. And so that centrality, I think, is a source of optimism. The other source of optimism, not to make you blush here, Mark, is your leadership. So I think you've brought a refreshed energy and intellectual focus on what the school needs, and that has me very fired up. And our alumni should feel pretty fired up too.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you. I appreciate that. Well, this has been lovely. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I always enjoy our conversations wherever we are in the world that we have them. I hope we'll have another one soon. And this is an opportunity for me to thank you for everything you're doing for the university and by association for the school. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark.